Hey everybody, how we doing? It's good to be back. Got to tell you, it has been what the kids call a hot minute since we have done one of these things. I was finishing the book, which I'll talk about a little bit tonight and get into a little bit. It's been a rough little go in a lot of different ways. Had some health problems in the old family. Been dealing with that, been navigating all of it while trying to get the book done and trying to exist in these hard times. Since we've done one of these things have trying to think of what the right word here is. I think escalated is the answer. Escalated, which is it's weird. I'm good. I'm all right. It's been like I said, it's been a weird go. It's good to be back on here. But I was talking to we got an interview with Sarah Kinzier that's coming out on the Muckrake podcast on Tuesdays. I'm really excited for everyone to hear that. But we were just talking about how this stuff just keeps growing and changing, and it's one of those things where, like, we've been doing this for a while now. You and we've been hanging out on Sundays, we've been watching elections. When I first started doing this, I wasn't really sure what it would become or how it would work or what we would be focusing on. When I started talking about politics and researching politics, I always I followed the trends and what was happening and where things were leading. And then there was a part of me that just hoped like hell that eventually there would be an off-ramp and that things would return to normal. Isn't the answer. Because normal is what got us here, which we have to understand. That the desire to quote unquote return to normal is problematic. It is a hope that the discomfort of the moment will go away, and maybe some comfort will come back, when in fact there needs to be some real reckoning with a lot of things. And as those warnings have continued, as writing books, doing the research, doing the podcast, doing the writing, all of that, it continues to get more and more real as it happens, as it escalates and changes and grows. There's some really disturbing stuff that is going on. There is some real problematic stuff that is going on. Nick and I on the podcast have been talking a lot about national conservatism, what it is, what it means, what the escalation in radicalization equals out to, where it's going. And on top of that, we have discussed on here and in my writing, we've discussed the Putinization of the United States of America, how a certain contingent of people have spread the illiberal neo-fascistic thoughts around the world, including the type of things that keep Vladimir Putin in power and continuing to grow his power, which unfortunately we have to talk about tonight, as we stand on the precipice of a potential war that has so many ramifications. Meanwhile, we're watching an escalating attack on truth, reality, and liberal democracy. We got to talk about a lot of stuff tonight that should be on your radar. I assume that it is, but in case it's not, strap in because we've got some serious stuff to talk about tonight. It is a little dark. Let's go up one more of these guys. What do you say? There we go. How about that? Get a little bit brighter. I mean, the topics aren't going to be bright, but the least we can do is turn the lights up. Cheers, by the way. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for coming and being here tonight. I miss these things when I don't do them. They are life-giving. They reaffirm my hopes, and they're very buoyant for me, is what they are. So thank you for coming out and doing this thing. The questions are really good tonight. And, instead of doing some sort of an opening statement, I think that getting to these questions is going to be really instructive for this conversation that we're going to have. As always, I'll be looking at the chat. Hi, everybody. I see there's some birthdays going on. Happy birthday to everybody celebrating. So, I found out, speaking of birthdays, I found out I share a birthday with John Mellencamp. How's that for Hoosier royalty? How about that thing? Whew, that was exciting. Something I didn't know. I should have known that. Part of my family's lore, for anybody who doesn't know, John Mellencamp, of course, is the Hoosier singer-songwriter, has always played this rebel. On his wedding day, he drove by, this was, I want to say the 1980s, had to have been either the 80s or the late 70s. And Mellencamp got married, and he zoomed on by on his Harley Davidson with his bride on the back, and he was just flipping everybody off as he went by, and he drove by my family. That's a piece of family lore. I think that's true. You know what I mean? It's never certain how many of these stories end up turning out to be true, but I like that little piece. All right, so let's get to the questions because we have a ton of topics. We're going to go long on the topics tonight because this is stuff that we have to talk about. We're going to explain it, get into it, talk about the background of it, what it means, and where it's going. One thing before we get going, I talked about this at the beginning of the year, the first Bourbon Talk in 2022. One of the things that I am doubling down on this year is offering solutions. I'm working on stuff, people I know, people that I trust, people that I respect. They're working on things. I'm working on things. There are solutions here. There are things that we can do. So we're going to talk about these in order to have the information. This is not just diagnosing in order to diagnose. This is, in fact, knowledge to be turned into power and action. So that's what we're going to do. Dory. Hey, Jared. Hey, Dory. Tennessee had a book burning rally just a day or two ago. Not a threat to burn them. They lit the fire, gathered, and threw them into the flames. Reality check, man. I saw that. I watched a bunch of videos from this thing. I kept pretty good tabs on it. And the reason that I did is because the burning of books, and of course, we spend a lot of time thinking about Nazi book burnings, right? Because that is the most famous modern history example. But it's not just Nazism. It's not just the Third Reich. This is throughout history. This is a facet of authoritarian control. And the idea, of course, behind burning books is the idea of eliminating knowledge or eliminating ideas that step outside of the purview of the orthodoxy of state power. The Nazis gained the idea of book burning actually from theocratic control. The church, for years and years and years, the worst thing that they could do whenever they found you in violation of orthodoxy, whenever they determined that you were a heretic, they would go ahead and they would kill you, but they would also go ahead and destroy your works. And of course, before the internet, mass publication, mass media, that meant that most of your stuff disappeared. The work that I did recently on the book was hindered in large part because after the Christian faith took over the Empire of Rome, they absolutely laid waste to so much knowledge. We're talking science, history, literature. They would go to great libraries and just burn them down to the ground. So it actually narrows your ability to understand history, right? And in order to try and understand time periods like Rome, like way earlier centuries, it makes it almost impossible to put together the pieces. When you actually look at that time period, like very little really survived from that razing to the ground. Of course, as time goes forward, the church controlled what people could read, what they thought, and it was a matter of control, right? This was a matter of saying, you know what, these things have to be destroyed because they might give people alternative ideas. They might, put crazy thoughts into their heads about freedom and thoughts that stray from orthodoxy. Like they might be able to free themselves. And the entire point of this is that authoritarianism seeks to make knowledge endangered. It seeks to go after anything that troubles its power. So what do we learn from this? What we learn from this is that these methods of control are actually very fragile, right? If you have to go around burning books, if you have to make sure that either the material isn't available or people are terrified to read that material, if you have to do that, what you're actually saying is, my ideas are not strong. They're incredibly weak, right? If they have to be reduced to ash in order for my power base to continue, then what you are actually saying is that I have to control people. I have to make sure that nobody could even for a moment imagine something outside of my design. Now, in this case, what we have here is very much my understanding of the book burning that we saw was it was very much an evangelical culture war book burning. I think a large part of it was Harry Potter or magical realism or whatever. And, these things have always like been a sign that something is really wrong in the culture and the body politic. The problem here is that this is a canary in the coal mine type situation. And if you watch this thing, what you notice is that the burning of the book, and this is actually something that happened during the rise of Nazi Germany, the burning of the books was actually like this ritual that bound the people together. And this is a problem that we're facing right now, which is there are a ton of people who are desperate to be a part of something. They are desperate to feel like that they belong to something larger than themselves. And one of the things that religion and religious type ideas offer them is the idea that you can be part of something and that there's something over here that is dangerous and that we have to be against. It's funny. Will actually says in the chat, it's tailgating for dummies. What it actually is, it's very much like a sporting type thing. It gives you an identity. It gives you an in-group to be a part of. And when you are against the evil thing that's out there, it allows you to believe suddenly that you yourself within this community and within this fight, that you have purpose. A lot's going on with that. And a lot of what happens with authoritarianism is about that purpose. And the really frightening thing that we have going on here, and we're going to touch on this a lot. Heidi, we're going to talk about Joe Rogan here in just a few minutes, actually. That's one of the questions that's on this list. As this occurs, this seeding of this idea of destroying knowledge, that there has to be an orthodoxy that everybody is living through, or that everybody is defining their life by, is part of a larger project. It's part of an illiberal authoritarian movement that has taken hold in this country. And right now, seeing that is terrifying. I mean, if you watch, you can see on people's faces, there's something within them that is being exercised. There's something within them that is being inspired by this, right? And the problem is, the moment that you start burning books, you're going to burn more books, because that is not a type of situation that stops. You don't just go to a book burning and, you go about your life for the rest of your life. Like, you are fighting something evil. That is something that you are going to dedicate yourself to. And as a result, if you're willing to go down the road of burning books, if you are willing to start destroying knowledge and restricting what other people can have access to, you're going to be on board for a whole lot of other authoritarian actions, right? And a large part of this, by the way, is the fact that our education does not touch on what fascism, authoritarianism, and all of these actions are. We haven't been given the knowledge in our education and in our socialization. We haven't been taught what this is. Those of us who see it, we see it, and it's a terrifying thing. But in this situation, these people do not understand necessarily what they're doing. The only thing that they're feeling is that they're being attracted to a fight that gives them purpose and gives them importance. Now, with that, just as a transition, Jennifer says, "Thank God you're back." Thank God I'm back. Cheers. I had to do it in part because of this next question. What are the possible ramifications of Russia working with China? What do you think Putin's end goal is? I don't believe big business wants or will allow a nuclear war, but something is going on. Thoughts? Absolutely something is going on, and something has been going on for a long time. This has not just sprouted up. And that's why I keep saying Donald Trump is not the sickness. He's the symptom of it, okay? This has been going on for a very, very long time. Vladimir Putin has been in charge of Russia and has been using illiberalism for forever at this point. And what he has been able to engage in is particularly an idea that is forwarded by people like Alexander Dugin. And Dugin, unfortunately, features very heavily in my new book because his ideology of illiberalism or neo-fascism, depending upon what day you find him and how truthful he wants to be in the interview that he's giving, is linked specifically to the efforts of people like Steve Bannon and national conservatism. So that illiberalism, which again, let's define it very quickly. Liberalism is the idea that the individual has freedoms, particularly the freedom of property. And what comes from that is multiculturalism, tolerance, individual rights and freedoms, liberties. They say that doesn't work and that has failed. And in fact, what they're actually attacking is neoliberalism, or globalism as we would call it, and that it is ready to be destroyed. It's ready to topple. And by the way, they're right about that. Neoliberalism is it's incredibly fragile right now. And if the right person gives it the right push, it's done. The question is what comes next. And a lot of these actors now, including Putin, including Jinping, a lot of the you got your Orbans. This is an international movement, and it's in every major nation state. And the reason why it's in every major nation state is because neoliberal globalism has undermined and hollowed out the national state. So all of a sudden, the people who are in the state have no idea what's going on. They feel terrified. Their jobs, their ways of life, obviously have been taken away in large part because of algorithms that they could never understand, and even the people who use barely understand. And so what helps? All of a sudden you start using racism. All of a sudden you start using nationalism. And in all of these different places, those ideas of xenophobia, those ideas of racism, it starts taking hold. And that is most definitely what has happened in the United States of America. There's a reason why these people prefer Vladimir Putin, because it's the same story. Putin says, and stop me if you've heard this before, Putin says that he is facing a conspiracy, the New World Order, globalism, which is attacking Russia and is trying to, make their kids gay or, indict their kids. As a result, they pick on vulnerable populations like gay people and trans people. And meanwhile, you don't actually have rights. Like, you have rights on paper. You have the idea that you can say things, that you can gather, that you can publish things. But, chances are that you might die. So as a result, you just shouldn't do it. This is how stuff works in Russia. This is how stuff works in Hungary. And that is what a lot of people are trying to make happen here in America. So, what do we have at this point? What we have at this point is an international illiberal movement. And within this movement, you absolutely have Russia and China that are involved. As Putin is getting ready to possibly invade Ukraine, he has assurances from a lot of allies. And by the way, those allies, it's everybody from Russia to Hungary to people within countries like the United States. So, what's going to happen here? You're right. Big business does not want a nuclear war. And I do not think that that's what we're probably looking at. The field of battle at this point is probably going to be through cyber warfare, limited engagement if there is some sort of actual war between the United States or NATO or anybody else. I have to tell you, we don't know how extensive they have infiltrated our systems, including our power grids, including the internet. We have no idea what that might look like. Add to that the fact that you have all kinds of people within the United States who prefer Vladimir Putin to any sort of democratic rival. I don't know what that looks like either. If he doesn't, it's like there's a real possibility at this point that he will invade. Basically, the Western world is going to have to make a decision. And the problem with neoliberal globalism is that everybody is now interconnected. So even the idea of financial sanctions against Putin at this point hurts everybody, because that's the system that they have created. They believe that that is exactly how they were going to avoid war until somebody decides to carry out war. That's how it always works. These people are so narcissistic and hubristic and thinking that they can freeze everything, all the borders, all the power, all the profits, all of that, and that nothing could possibly ever change after that. Until somebody decides, because capitalism tells them, that there is an opportunity to make money and gain power. So what happens then? I don't know. The big question that I keep bringing up is, what happens when capitalism decides that the United States of America has served its purpose as the capital of capitalism? Which it could do. We have no idea what exactly is going on with this economy. We have no idea what's going on with capitalism. Cryptocurrency is another thing that plays into all of this, and we have no idea where that goes, what lies behind it, and what it could do. We are on the precipice, as I kept telling people. We are in the precipice of some major changes. And in this case, the problem is that the chessboard, it's a bad board. There's not a lot of good answers here. On one part, like, going to war sucks. Sending a bunch of teenagers over to kill and fight each other over territory and money, that sucks. That absolutely sucks. On the other hand, just letting it happen, I mean, that at this point would basically change the geopolitics of the entire situation. It would change, spheres of influence. We have no idea what that would actually look like or what that would actually entail. On top of that, you want to talk about the extreme right in the United States of America, which we got to have a big talk about that tonight and what shape that it's taking. On one hand, if you go to war, they're going to oppose it because they don't want you to fight Putin, because they support Putin. That's one of the reasons why we're seeing a split in the Republican Party, is because the Republican Party is basically going through its own civil war right now between traditional neoliberal Mitch McConnell type Republicans and these national conservatives. So, on one hand, if we went to war, they wouldn't support the war, and God knows how weird things might get in this country if the war doesn't go well. If we don't go to war, well, all of a sudden then we're weak, and look at America falling apart, and all of a sudden we might see a situation in which that type of militaristic nationalism goes towards that side. And that's one thing that I keep saying. The problem here is when you take what we have now, when you take what the radicalized right is, all of a sudden the question then becomes, what happens when you add in the militarism? What happens when all of a sudden you start talking about making America great again through military means. All of a sudden, then you kickstart the idea of American exceptionalism, the idea of American militarism. You go ahead and pull off the scab of the forever wars and you say, you know what, we've been betrayed, almost like a knife in the back. Where does that go? Nowhere good. Nowhere good. The chessboard's bad right now. The chessboard is really, really bad. Now, what does that mean for us? What it means for us is first and foremost that we have to pay attention to what's going on, but we also have to look behind the headlines. None of this stuff that we're talking about right now is finding its way into the major publications. Why? Because you have a bunch of geopolitical sickos who are out there moving risk pieces around a board, basically salivating over the possibility of war, because they still think that war is something that you can necessarily win. And it's not. Everybody loses in these situations. So we have to pay close attention to this thing, but we also have to understand that everything that we've been watching, and for me, I really opened my eyes and really started to gain an understanding of what was actually happening in politics and culture and society. It started for me back in 2015, 2016. So I've been having like deep political sort of clarity about this stuff for 6-7 years, give or take. Over the past 6 or 7 years, everything that we've been watching, from misinformation to these radicalizing attempts, these psyops, these things that have been carried out in this country, the way that we have been pushed apart from one another, the way that we have become radicalized and polarized, all of this stuff like boils up to this. This is around the moment where all the things that we've been dealing with are starting to come to a head. That's a lot. That's a lot. Now, with that question, John said, all right, let's say Russia invades. What then? What does that even look like? So my guess at this point is that if they're going to invade, it'll be probably in the next 2 weeks. The United States has already gotten a hold of, these doctored propaganda false flag videos that would basically, yeah, Jennifer, we're going to talk about the truckers here in just a second. That plays into all of that, or all of this. So if they invade, probably will do so under the banner of saying that they were attacked and that they are protecting themselves. Which, by the way, for anybody keeping track in history, that's what America does in almost every engagement where it goes to war. But in this case, we're looking at like deep fakes. We're looking at a lot of stuff that could possibly happen here. I would have to say that the United States would not take immediate action. I have to say, with all of it, you would probably look at a couple of days of trying to get together coalitions. We're going to find out who's where, what. France is weird. Germany is weird. We're going to find out where Britain is on stuff, and Britain is weird. We're basically going to find out where capitalism is and what capitalism wants and where it wants to go. And a lot of this, I think, is going to come down on what the future is going to look like, right? Like whether or not we're talking about oil or we're talking about technologies of the future. And all of a sudden, we're going to figure out what capitalism wants from the near future. And that's the thing with all of this, is that capitalism is a current that is completely underneath the surface, that all of these different things happens. And if you look at it, if you look for it, you will see how it motivates and it moves things. But in terms of all of this, like, it just seems like there are just actors who are doing it, or there are just, states that are doing all this. But there's always capitalism that is right underneath the surface. It's looking for getting out. It's always looking for new opportunities, new markets, new places that will be able to push it to new heights, or at least to get it to the point where it can become more and more consolidated, because it's looking basically like Highlander, like getting to one point, with just accumulated capital. But I don't know. I have no idea what that's going to look like at first, because all of the options are bad. All the options are bad. And I tell people all the time, they say, do you think we should go to war? Do you think we should? And it's like, I would rather not play the game. This sucks. This is a really bad hand. I wish it would just fold. I wish we could move on to the next thing. But I mean, this is what Vladimir Putin and people like him have been pushing for forever. So we have illiberalism, which is starting to come together, which is something I've talked about on this podcast podcast. It's something I've talked about on this live stream over and over and over again. We have a consolidation of similar authoritarian illiberal interests, and they are working together, and they have worked together for years. They share information, they help one another, they support one another, and it's only becoming more obvious with every single day. All right, so we have two questions about this, but it's about the trucker situation in Canada, which I have to assume that Nick and I are going to talk about on the new podcast Tuesday, which also is going to, like I said, include the Sarah Kinzier interview. So two questions I'll read together and then I'll answer. Someone's son, who's funding the truckers for freedom fascist AstroTurf? And then Mir MD, can you talk about the fascist trucker convoy in Toronto? I'm hearing college students afraid to go outside. Why aren't we seeing more of this on major news outlets? So I'll start with this. Who's funding it? It's everybody that you think that it is. It's dark money. It's wealthy people. It's all of the people who are pulling out all of the stops. I tweeted about this today. It's a huge coincidence that suddenly in the United States of America and in Canada, within a 2-year span, somehow or another, a bunch of dark money gets a bunch of conspiracy theory pilled residents to go to the Capitol and, disrupt business. That's not a coincidence. There's nothing coincidental about that. Liberal democracy is under attack. It's like in a boxing match where all of a sudden you get the sense that one of the fighters is like ready to go down. They're on the ropes. So what do? You increase the attack. And that's what's happening right now. That's why whenever I'm talking about January 6th now, one of the things that I'm focusing on more than ever is who are the people behind it? Who are the people who are paying those bills? Who are the people who are spreading those ideas? Who are the people who are spreading these conspiracy theories to get people to become radicalized and also start to embrace these authoritarian tactics? It's the wealthy. And the wealthy are ready to destroy liberal democracy, and they're ready to take care of things and basically create a new order of illiberalism. They're all behind this thing. That's 100% what this is. So yes, it's an absolute AstroTurf operation. It seems more and more like there's probably some of these things that are going to take over and happen probably in the United States of America. This was a really brilliant operation because, one, it has the veneer of being like a grassroots Volkish type thing, right? It's a bunch of working people and they're tired of this bullshit and they're not going to take it anymore, right? That's a wonderful veneer, and it's how the wealthy like to do their business. There's a reason why they use the Tea Party or the Reopen thing or all this education stuff. It's literally AstroTurfed veneers, and it looks great. And what do? The people who have benefited off of neoliberal globalism and who have gained more and more power and more profit and more control, what they do is they say, hey, I know who caused this. I know who made your life worse. And by the way, it's them. But what do? They say, it's that guy over there. And let me tell you something. He's not from around here. And I bet he's coming for your job. And I bet he's involved in a conspiracy. And then they just turn and use them like a weapon. So yes, this is absolutely an AstroTurfed operation. It's brilliant in its veneer and it's brilliant in its tactics. You get all of those trucks into the Capitol, you clog all the lanes, and by the way, it shows, hey, in America, we had a mob overthrow the Capitol. God knows what could have happened there. All of a sudden now we have a bunch of trucks that are clogging up all the avenues. It's almost like the overthrow of a government. It's almost like a hard or a soft coup could be carried out if all of these elements were activated in the right situation. So as of right now, in 2022, leading up to the presidential election of 2024 and whatever in the hell this war is going to be, they've now had a dry run of a couple of things. It's really problematic. Now, why is the media not talking more about it? I've said this before, and I'll say it again, but I want to go on the record with it once more. The people who are supposed to be warning us about this, there's so much that is happening that is keeping them from actually doing their jobs. And there are different groups of them. One group is a group of people, and by the way, the media is a lot of very, very affluent, wealthy, privileged people. I mean, you almost have to be at this point to work in the media, right? Because the jobs aren't really there anymore. The salaries aren't really there. You got to live in New York City or Los Angeles or San Francisco. And, you really can't afford those things unless you have, I don't know, trust funds or wealthy families who are more than happy to pay you. And on top of that, you might notice that a lot of the people who are in those positions, they're legacy cases. Their parents were in the media, or they were in the government, or they were extremely wealthy, like Gilded Age families, right? So what happens? What happens is these people do not want to look in the mirror and understand how their privilege has played into all of this. They don't want to think about the fact that neoliberal globalism has turned hypercapitalism into a reality in which people are being exploited for their benefit. They don't want to think about their own privilege. They don't want to look in the mirror and really take a long, long look at this thing. So a lot of them just are ignorant of it because they can't handle it. It would be a blow to their own identities or their own ideas. There are others who are making a ton of money off of it. I mean, I'm sorry, but Jeff Zucker having to leave CNN, they made so much money off of this stuff. So much money off of it. And the way that they made money was sensationalizing it. There's nothing sensational about this truckers convoy. It's convoluted. All of a sudden, you have to start talking about wealthy people. And let me tell you something that the corporate media does not want to talk about. And that is what the wealthy people are doing. That is why whenever we are given political coverage, it's personality based. It's like a reality TV show, right? You got Ted Cruz in one corner. You got, I don't know, Elizabeth Warren or AOC in the other, and they're going to come out swinging at each other. Well, that's fine. You can talk about the personality part of politics, but they have no interest in talking about the people who are actually paying for these things and the people who are using these people like chess pieces. Nobody in any of this wants to actually pull the curtain back and look at the fact that you have Kochs and Davos. They don't want to do that. There's no interest in it because they themselves are corporate brands. So what do we get? We get a simplified soap opera type idea of what's going on. So as a result, you're not going to talk about things like this truck convoy as an AstroTurf, like super wealthy thing. I mean, the people who are involved in this are absolutely the type of people who helped finance January 6th. And they're not being talked about whatsoever. It's about Donald Trump and Meadows and Giuliani and all of the, and by the way, Giuliani's on like The Masked Singer now. It's a game. They don't want to talk about what's actually occurring here. And by the way, for the record, that's not just our media. That's also the Democratic Party. This is one of the reasons why the Democratic Party has no answers whatsoever for why they can't pass things. Because to actually talk about why Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema and the Democrats who hide behind them, and there are many of them, they can't talk about the fact that they are being bought by dark money and corporate finances. There's no way that they can have that conversation. There's a couple of Democrats, obviously, who do talk about that. But the reason why the party as a whole can't tell you why they can't do anything is because they are bought and sold by the same corporations and the same wealthy people, or different corporations and different wealthy people. I have to tell you, the conversations that I've been having over the past couple of months. And I've been talking with some people about possible solutions, possible things that could be done. The conversations that I am having on the quote unquote left, it's not the left. It's a bunch of people who think that you and I are stupid and could never, ever be possibly trusted. What do they want? They want their own Fox News. They want their own psyops. They want their own manipulations. They have no interest whatsoever in actually exposing what's going on because they're just as interested in getting corporations rich, wealthy, and powerful as the Republican Party is. It just so happens that the Democratic Party doesn't want to say the racist, sexist, xenophobic stuff. They'll, put on a show of being tolerant, and the Republican Party on the other side is like, well, we're going to be just absolutely fascistic and authoritarian. And that's what their brand is, because that's what they're being paid to do. It's really, really screwed up. And that's why we can't talk about what's actually going on. All right, next up, Sheila Lee. Have you noticed that there's literally no line dividing Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones anymore? Like at all? Absolutely. And if you've been watching these, and if you've listened to the podcast, I've talked about this a lot, which is that the mainstream right, and I'm talking about Fox News, I'm talking about the Republican Party, Alex Jones tested out all of their stuff. They just saw what happened with Alex Jones and what he did and what got popular and what really heated up. And then they said, oh, yeah, we'll take some of that and then we'll just, we'll disinfect it, which, of course, is what also happened with QAnon. Those conspiracy theory channels, personalities, and efforts, those are testing grounds. That's where they find out what narratives will work. That's why we have all of these conspiracy theories right now, because they tested pretty positively. And this next generation of the party is more than happy to use it. If you turn on Tucker Carlson on just any average night, we're talking about white replacement theory, which, by the way, is anti-Semitic, neo-fascistic trash, or we're talking about false flags on January 6th, or we're talking about, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Like, he has been on the air saying that Alex Jones is a better journalist than anybody else in media. And Alex Jones basically every single day now spends his hours of broadcasting flirting with Tucker Carlson and trying to get him to regurgitate his stories. They've even taken members of Alex Jones's crew and operations and had them on Tucker Carlson's programming. And why is that? Because illiberalism and authoritarianism depends on conspiracy theories. It depends on those narratives of an outside threat working with an internal group of traitors. It depends on that for its power. Because authoritarians and neo-fascistic powers need you to feel terrified. Not you, because you're hip to all this. You pay attention to this stuff. They need their base to feel terrified. And if they're terrified, then whatever is necessary to protect them, they'll go along with. And that includes violence. It includes anti-democratic actions, disenfranchisement, literally anything that you could imagine. They're totally fine with as long as it works. Rich, if these state legislatures pass their voting bills allowing themselves to choose electors, if there are calls of voting fraud, and they actually do, how do you think people will respond? Would that even wake followers up to the fact that the GOP is anti-democracy? So here is a problem. So the way that America has been splintered up and the way that you have seen a divide between the different parts of the country, the only states that are passing these electors laws, right? The idea that they can go in and change an election result or whatever, they're in solidly red states. Now, there are certain states that are purple, like a Georgia or something like that, in which they're trying this stuff. But the red states have more or less been abandoned by the type of people who would be upset about this. So what we're possibly looking at are red states that will basically protect themselves from ever having a possibility of turning purple, which means that we will have dyed-in-the-wool states that could never possibly change regardless of who was running and what was being said. The answer right now to what is happening in politics is that you have a lot of people who say, you know what, this is our state, and I don't know what's going to happen over there. The question now is what's going to happen in those purple states? What's going to happen in those so-called swing states that are being, they're made pivot states. They can move from one party to the next, depending on the election, depending upon the issues, depending on the candidates. So it's basically a cleavaging of the American electorate. So the question is, are people going to rise up and be pissed off about this? Some people But what happens with that? It's going to find its way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has been stolen by the Republican Party. What do you do then? What do you do when the main arbiter of this, which, by the way, created their power to be the arbiter in all of these things, what do you do when it's been stolen? Well, that's a hell of a question. The $64,000 question that we have yet to answer. The solution is to do something about it now, which is to pass some sort of a federal protection of voting rights and to, get some oversight back into the system. The problem with that is that the federal government has been depowered. We are now living in a very strange time in which the federal government has become a complete logjam and in which the states have been given most of the power and purview. What does it take? An act of courage. It takes somebody in a position of leadership to tell it like it is, use a bully pulpit, and go after these people and actually talk about what's going on. But right now, the Democratic Party has no interest whatsoever in doing that. And because they're showing no initiative to do that, we're looking at a midterms in which they stand to be wiped out because they will not provide an alternative understanding of why things are happening, because they can't talk about corporate money in politics. It's frustrating as hell. I still think that we're going to avoid this stuff. I still think that we are going to win out. Jojo, I heard you talk a little about it on the podcast, but can you break down the Joe Rogan situation? What do you make of all of this? First of all, I think Joe Rogan's repugnant. I mean, I don't think that is a controversial thing as of right now. I think he is popular and wealthy and influential because he says the things that he says. And capitalism, of course, has an opening for all of those things. If he got fired from Spotify tomorrow, he would probably figure out a way to make more money. So if he got, quote unquote, thrown or canceled or thrown off of Spotify, that would actually probably bring more people to listen to him, and he'd figure out a place to make more money. The problem here is that the profit motive is there for a Joe Rogan. If Joe Rogan wasn't doing it, somebody else would do it. And whenever you look at the way that capitalist motives work, there has to be somebody who's going to spout this stuff. There's going to be somebody who peddles it. There's tons of money to be made there. Alex Jones has made hundreds of millions of dollars because capitalism says, you know what, this is pretty good. Fox News, great way to make money. That's what capitalism does because there's no ethical or moral thing behind it. It's simply unvarnished profit, and it doesn't matter if it hurts anybody. A big issue with all of this is that this, again, because of neoliberalism wants you to go to corporations and have them solve your problems for you because the government can't do it. They never, ever, ever wanted. I'll answer that in a second. I am not, because I think that's a good question. They don't want you to be able to vote people into office in order to make changes. So as a result, we have to ask corporations to make decisions. This is why most of the culture battles are either people getting fired or canceled or getting shows removed or whatever, and then they just go and they find somewhere else to do it, right? Because it's actually an economic issue. It's not a political issue. So in this case, you have someone like an Apple, and Apple is all of a sudden like, we got Neil Young because we don't have Joe Rogan. Well, guess what? They have Steve Bannon. They have a ton of people who have a ton of podcasts on Apple. And to boot, Apple makes a ton of money off near slave labor, forced labor, child labor, exploitation around the world. These corporations now brand themselves based on political identities that they think that you would be into. This is why Mars, which makes M&M, or M&Ms, I guess it would be, they benefit off of child labor for their chocolate, but they can say, hey, look at all of our M&M characters. They are, representative. Same thing with Nike. Whenever they paid Kaepernick millions of dollars to make it seem as if they were a progressive company, while meanwhile they're destroying the earth. They're engaging in this mass consumption, but they're also using the exploitation for resources and, terrible labor. So the truth is, when it comes to this system, there's nothing ethical in any way, shape, or form. You have to make decisions for yourself on how you spend your money and how you behave. The bigger question in all of this isn't Joe Rogan. The bigger question in all of this is what kind of a system creates an opening for someone like a Joe Rogan to make the money and have the influence that he does. That's the bigger question in all of this. But yes, he's absolutely repugnant. Now, I am not says, what do you think about the geographic division of states? Timothy Snyder says states will become separate countries. I don't know if we're going to see that, but there is a real possibility that all of a sudden you're going to see geographical alignments or geographical partnerships. And my guess is that you're going to see more and more of that as global climate change starts to take hold. When all of a sudden you have dwindling resources, you have problems in which there's not as much land, there's more and more refugees. All of a sudden that starts happening, we're going to start looking at the possibility of these groups having to align with one another, water, power, what to do with these refugees. So unless something unites us, unless something gets us on the same page, which again, capitalism has no interest in doing, unless something goes ahead and starts combining us, there's a possibility in our lifetimes that we're going to start seeing states join together in like-minded, ideological-based, regional-based efforts. But it could get real bad, and particularly as there are climate refugees. Because if we don't take care of this authoritarianism, if we don't take care of these issues, when climate change hits and all of a sudden we have the muckrake state. I'll go for a muckrake town. How about that? A muckrake village. Because all of a sudden when those borders start going away, the resources start going away, the refugees start moving, and I'm talking about everybody from other countries, but also from here. Ooh, it's going to be a lot. But again, I think we're going to get past that. Quinn would like to get your reaction to Neil Gorsuch referring to what he calls the so-called separation of church and state during oral arguments. Are we closer than we thought to becoming a full-blown theocracy? This is one of the, basic tenets of, is there a Discord for chatting outside of lives? The muckrake community has a Discord. I like it a lot. I actually find it to be a really compelling, thought-provoking social media platform. I enjoy being over there a lot. In terms of Gorsuch and the so-called separation of church and state, one of the myths that animates the current right, and it has to, because in terms of, this illiberalism, right? In terms of that, you need to have something that supersedes liberal democracy. A reason why you shouldn't give everybody rights, a reason why you shouldn't have tolerance and multiculturalism, a reason why you shouldn't have democracy. Religion is the answer. Because if you go ahead and you say, there is a religious purpose for doing this, all of a sudden people will get on board. And again, going back to what I was talking about earlier, there's a threat over there. Guess what? We're endangered. As a result, these rights, these ideas, liberal democracy needs to be dismantled because we have to protect ourselves from these threats. Yes, absolutely. I read Edmund Burke. Edmund Burke figures in really, really hardcore into the new book, Midnight Kingdom. Because actually, if you look at Edmund Burke and the origins of modern conservatism, it's riddled through with conspiracy theories, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. So at the exact same time that he's against the French Revolution, which is the basis of modern conservatism, he's talking about how it is a Jewish Illuminati conspiracy theory. So the actual beginnings of modern conservatism is in itself conspiracy theories. So the entire idea is that you have to use this theocratic idea in order to overwhelm liberal democracy, multiculturalism, and tolerance. Because liberalism says, yeah, of course gay people should be able to marry. Of course people shouldn't be discriminated against. Of course people should be able to vote. Those are tenets of liberalism. So in terms of all of this, you have to say, no, there is something higher that supersedes all of that. And so as a result, they have to peddle this myth that there is no separation of church and state and that America is a Christian nation, which is not true. America was founded by colonies, largely of Christian people, but the actual founders were liberals. The actual founders were people who looked at Europe and they looked at all of the wars and the bloodshed that took place over religion, particularly the battle between Catholicism and Protestantism. And they said, we cannot have that here. As a matter of fact, they saw religion as a really dangerous thing that was used by tyrants to control people. So they erected a very, very rigid boundary between church and state, and they wanted to take religion out of politics. So in terms of that, if you want to really piss off some conservatives, if you want to have a hard conversation with conservatives and they start talking about how America is a Christian nation, basically tell them they have a choice. Are you talking about colonists who stole land and enslaved people, or are you talking about the founders who believed that religion had no place in politics because they were afraid of the bloodshed that had taken place over in Europe and also believed that it led to tyranny? Because you got to make a choice. And whenever you start making choices, whenever you look at the actual history and the ideology of these things, it's inconsistent. And all of a sudden you start to realize, oh, wow, the stories that I've been told aren't real, which is one of the reasons, of course, why they don't want us to have real history. Brett Schneider. I'm currently reading How Civil Wars Start. Good book by Barbara Walter, and one of the opening pages is so important. My question is, what escalations do you think we'll see when we get closer to midterms? The question at this point is, what is the animating point of the midterms? So are we going to go to war or are we not? If we go to war, that is a different story. All of a sudden, we're going to be talking about a lot of different things. We're going to be start talking about what direction the world should move, what direction America can move. You're going to see a lot of very, very vocal militarism and illiberalism paired with American exceptionalism. If that doesn't happen, chances are it's probably rain. Got a lot of rain going right now. It's cold and rainy. Maybe CRT, maybe control of education, those types of things. The question is there going to be some sort of a panic? Is there going to be a motorcade, or what do they call it? I can't ever remember what the actual term for it is, right? There's a lot of immigrants heading for the border, right? So what kind of escalation are we going to see? We're probably going to see more, chances like what we've seen in Ottawa. Caravan. That's right. Caravan. Exactly right. It's a weird word. What a ridiculous absurdity that was. Caravan. My God. So the question here is there going to be some sort of a big major scandal or a big major outrage? I mean, we just saw, unfortunately, another person shot by the police. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what the escalations are. The only thing that I know is along this current path, it's somebody brought up my bed carafe. Quick story. I bought a glass bed carafe because I get thirsty in the middle of the night, and my cat broke it. A little cat just knocked it off, and it just blew up into 1,000 pieces. I was so proud of that thing. I was so happy with my bedside carafe. I was even bragging about it on the Muckrake podcast. I was like, "This has made my life better. You should look into it." And then she just busted the damn thing, just busted it, and it happened in slow motion. She knocked it down. A carafe. It's just like a glass bottle with a little cup that you just put water in. She knocked it over, and then it got on its side, and like in slow motion, it just rolled towards the edge of the counter. And like I could have maybe grabbed it if I had like super speed, but I did not have super speed. Yeah, I can't wait till Nick all about this. He'll get a kick out of this. All right. Oh, we're almost at an hour here. But yeah, it's a fancy word for a pitcher. That's exactly right. Just a crate and barrel glass pitcher of water. That's all it was. So, what kind of escalation? I mean, it depends on what they think is going to win in this case. The conspiracy theories are just getting worse. They're just getting worse because they work, and it'll depend on whether or not we go to war or if we don't. And it'll be one of these situations where we're gonna have to be ready for this stuff, because this is how you win midterms. This is what has proven to be the correct route for victory for the Republican Party in the last few years. All right, we're about 10 seconds out from an hour. We still got some questions to go here. Let's do 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's wonderful being back. 2, 1, cheers. I do love doing this. It's nice hanging out with people. It's nice being out on the porch. It's nice getting into the specifics of this thing. I can't wait for you to hear the interview with Kinzier. It's a good one. It's coming out on Tuesday. The book's technically done. A draft is done. There's still tons of editing that is going to happen. I think I'm going to get back into the editing, not this coming week, but the week after. I'm very proud of the book. I got to be honest with you. And I got a little emotional about it. It's cold and rainy. I got a little emotional about it. Tracing history and what all happened. My family is poor. Really, really, really poor. And they've been exploited, and they have been radicalized, and I love them so much, and I wish it wasn't the case. And I hate that was the case. And the new book is a retracing of modern history from the moment that Rome bonded with Christianity all the way up until the present, taking measure of how conspiracy theories and stories and mythologies have been used to oppress people and to accumulate power. And I got to tell you, that it made things clearer for me than they've ever been before. I feel like I finally have answers to things. And yeah, I'm the most educated. My family couldn't get educated. My mom was able to do like a distance degree, but unfortunately, my family wasn't able to go to college and learn these things. And as a result, they got inundated with conspiracy theories that took advantage of the cultural traditions of the family, including religion. Okay. Julia, I don't think you and Nick have addressed the fake electors and the 7 battleground states yet on a Muckrake pod, unless I missed it. What's your take on all that? We have not. The electors, the fake electors, it's really incredible what they tried to do. And what you learn with all of this is they threw everything at the potential. Yes, I'm planning on doing an audio version of the new book. Also, while we're on the subject, on the Substack, JaredYatesSexton.substack.com, dispatches from a collapsing state. Here in the near future, I am going to put the audio versions of these bourbon talks on there for subscribers. So you'll have that available to you, and a bunch of other things I'm going to do for that. But with the fake electors, they threw everything at this situation. They had one think tank and group and dark money operation after another, trying literally everything that they could try. This whole thing, to be honest, is going to turn into a situation, going back to the red states basically being able to overturn elections. I truly, honestly believe that there is a real chance that in the future, every single election is going to involve this stuff, unless somebody takes action. And in all of this, you literally have groups of people. And I had an argument with the journalist Michael Cohen, not the lawyer Michael Cohen. And, we had a disagreement about it because he had said that what happened on January 6th and around the election proved that that the system worked and that there was no possibility for like these things to win out because it took too many people. There are people all around this country who are more than happy to do this. The fake electors prove that. There are more than enough people who are willing to get involved with this and sign their names, like Julia just said, and make this thing happen in public. What we are going to see are more and more people, and it's all about narratives. Okay? It's all about narratives. They believe that the election is being stolen and that the country is being destroyed, which, by the way, is an apocalyptic narrative, much like the Christian apocalyptic narrative, right? Which is the idea that if you don't act and if you don't do the right thing, the world will surely be destroyed by evil people and conspirators. That is what's going to happen with electors, with election officials. Eventually, people are going to come to believe the big lie that these elections are actually being stolen because the cognitive dissonance of, I believe this, and anybody who doesn't believe this is obviously acting out of bad faith and is obviously dangerous and has to be neutralized. So what we're actually talking about here are apocalyptic narratives. And these fake electors are representative of people who are going to be more and more willing to take that extra step to overthrow elections. So yeah, it was obvious that this thing was not only coordinated, but it was coordinated in massive ways. Massive, different ways. There was a giant plan to do this. And it wasn't just one. There were so many different groups that were immediately like, hey, we got some ideas about how to steal this election. One of the biggest problems in all of this is that there were too many different groups that had too many different plans, and nobody decided on one that they were going to really focus on. Which, by the way, if you think about it, it's kind of interesting the fact that Donald Trump's incapability of organizing or leading probably hurt the ability for him to carry out an actual coup. The question is, can somebody who has a lot more discipline and talent, can they pull it off? And the scary part is probably. They probably could. Stop Earn It. Hi, Jared. Have you heard of the Earn It Act? I have. It's a bill that will kill encryption in Section 230 and in the free and open internet as we know it. I believe it will be something that will escalate fascism in this country and abroad. With the idea of the internet, and this is something, I assume that in the past couple of weeks, suddenly you looked up and everybody in the world is not just talking about NFTs, but all of a sudden you're starting to see this phrase, which is Web 3. We're currently in Web 2.0, which is mutating into Web 3. And what we're actually looking at right now is like a complete exploitation of the internet. This is one of those moments, and there are these hinge points, right? There are these moments where it's almost like a crossroads where like one or two or three things could possibly happen. It's when things they get more malleable, and we're in a malleable moment right now. And this Web 3, yeah. If you, after we're done here and we have a couple more questions, go and check out Web 3. Just Google it and have yourself a good time. What we're looking at now, much like what happened with Web 2.0, is that there aren't just billions of dollars to be made right now. There are trillions. And whenever things are disrupted, whenever there's a malleable moment, whenever the future has to be constructed, all of a sudden, it's not just about billions. It's about trillions. It's who's going to take over that space? Who's going to determine what that future is? Which is why, of course, that Facebook moved into this metaverse idea. Right? Because all of a sudden they're like, oh, if we create a reality that everybody has to live within, suddenly you get to populate that entire reality with a second economy. All of a sudden, all the real estate problems, there's almost unlimited real estate, except for it's limited because it has to be limited in order to charge people more. But then all of a sudden, you have like almost a second world of things to sell people. So you and I, so I'm sitting here, I'm wearing this coat, I'm wearing this toboggan, I'm wearing these boots. So these are things that I own. Well, what about me in a metaverse or some sort of a virtual reality, right? Well, I have to buy this coat, these jeans, these boots, this toboggan. Well, how do you buy those things if there's not scarcity or if there's no such thing as actual property? So the next thing you need to do is you need to create that, which is what is happening with the metaverse. If you go back on my Substack, I did it very, very earlier on. I can't remember exactly when it was, but you'll see it if you find it. I talked about this, where the plan was to shove all of us into a virtual reality that could be controlled by corporations, and they could just profit off of us and our so-called fantasies, and that they would do it in order to sort of export our democratic energies or the polarization that we're undergoing. That's exactly what all of this is about. So the question here is, who is going to control that next generation of things? So you're exactly right. Like these acts and these moves, it's all about trying to take control of this stuff. It's all about controlling where information goes, where reality goes, and who makes those trillions, who makes all of those things. And I've said it during a Bourbon talk. You're exactly right. Like this has been the thing. And it is to a toboggan. In southern Indiana, a beanie is a toboggan. I'm sorry. I didn't come up with that. That wasn't my choice. That's my culture. Those are my people. I know that a toboggan is a bobsled, but where I come from, a beanie is called a toboggan. Sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't make the rules. I didn't come up with it. Those are my people. Vivaldi's, thank you. Thank you, Chad. Vivaldi's Four Seasons. I'm a music teacher. And good for you. What an amazing job that is. Very, very good. Oh, Southern Missouri, also toboggans. Good. Absolutely hate these book bans. Me too. How long do you think before we start hearing calls from the right for only appropriately patriotic music to be taught, banning musicals or artwork with upsetting subject matter? Wait, I'm so sorry, Vivaldi's. I'm going to answer this in a second. Somebody asked if I eat chili over noodles too. I don't. My chili does not have noodles in it, but I will tell you that my mom's does. My mom's chili does have noodles in it, and she makes some of the best chili that's out there. It's not technically chili. No, Mike, we don't drink pop. We don't drink soda. We drink Coke. Where I'm from, every soft drink is called Coke. Coke. We sit in our toboggans. We drink our Coke. It's a true story. So, Vivaldi's Four Seasons. The answer is that we will deal with a ton of restrictions on art if this stuff is really set in stone. It'll be architecture, it'll be music, it'll be movies, it'll be all of it. If we actually get to the point where these national conservative forces take over, it will be a total dominance of all culture. And I'm talking about everything from what you watch to what you listen to where you go, how you spend your time. This will be a total takeover of culture because it has to be. All authoritarianism is about dominating every possible vector of society. Everything is about controlling exactly how you think, how you express yourself. This is why they don't want free speech. This is why they don't want people to be able to, investigate and trouble gender. Because the moment that you start doing that, you start to have a little bit of freedom. You start to be able to think outside of the orthodoxy. The most important thing is orthodoxy, period. That's the most important thing, is having one type of way that you have to think. And if you don't think that way, you are punished. And that does it does a hell of a lot of good for authoritarians, because the moment you find somebody who moves and strays outside of orthodoxy, you crush them. And when you crush them, all of a sudden you are able to neutralize any sort of future threat. But this goes back to what I started saying at the beginning of this bourbon talk. The only reason why you crush these ideas, the only reason why you don't allow people free expression is because you're weak and because you're unable to engage in actual ideas. BB, I did promise solutions tonight, and this is what I will tell you. We have to stop watching politics. We have to get involved. We have to go to school board meetings. We have to go to local governance. We have to go to city council meetings. We have to talk to one another. We have to. Absolutely have to. And the entire reason is because we have been taught that this is a game, that this is a show to watch. And the reason that we've been taught that is to commodify it and to keep us from being involved in politics. We have to. Have to. And the moment that we start doing that, and the moment that we start getting involved in this once more, once we start engaging in solidarity, once we start working with one another, once we start engaging in this process, we can start challenging and troubling this system that prioritizes corporate and exorbitant wealth, because it has to be reformed. It has to be reformed. There's no other choice. We have to start having real, actual people to get into government and actually start working. That's all we have to do. Have to do it. Last one. Shark Toast. What, if any, will be the backlash to the anti-CRT push? Seems like they're overplaying their hand, but I'm not sure who's going to step up and put an end to it. That is the question. Will this pay dividends in the midterms? And I don't know. In some states, particularly the strong red states, it's not going to have a backlash. In the purple states, so-called, the ones that are leaning in certain ways, unfortunately, it comes down to a lot of suburban voices. Are they going to put up with it? Are they going to deal with this thing? It is such an obvious power grab. It's being funded. It's being focused on by think tanks that are being funded by people who want to privatize public education. They're the ones who write the legislation. They're the ones that hand it over to these legislatures. Legislatures don't know what's going on. They simply know that there's an opportunity to do this. Some of them believe that there's an actual problem that they are fighting. Others are just being handed this, and they know that it is politically advantageous to go after these people. I don't know if there's going to be a backlash. All I know is that it is a larger top-down funded idea. It is something that was created intentionally to win these races, to radicalize people at the local level, and they need to understand that this is being carried out by very, very wealthy and powerful people in order to infiltrate their towns. They may be scared of it. They may not know what's going on. They might be terrified of the idea of CRT. It's like, by the way, CRT. It's cold, so I didn't do the quotes, but it's quotes. They're terrified of this stuff, sure, because they've been told about one conspiracy theory that's coming for them after another. But it's actually wealthy people who are coming in to try and take over their towns. And who's going to suffer? It's going to be their kids. It's going to be their kids' kids. So I hope that there's a backlash when people start to actually understand it. But that's what has to happen first. They have to understand that. All right. So those are our questions for the night. I got to tell you, it means a lot to me that you come out, you hang out for these things. I'm sorry that we haven't done these for a hot minute. Like I said, had to take care of the book. I had some family situations that I had to deal with. Y'all mean a lot. Y'all are family to me too. And it has been a weird... You know what? That's the thing. When you live in Georgia for long enough, you your callus comes off. It is cold tonight. It is cold tonight, but you're exactly right. My callus came off a while back, so it's whenever it gets a little bit cold, I'm a little cold. Now, again, we got Sarah Kinzier coming on the Tuesday episode of the Monk Break podcast. I'm really excited about that. I got to get in touch with Nick about what we're going to talk about, but I want to get into this Canadian convoy bullshit. There will be a new Substack that will come out, I believe, on Wednesday. I think that's right. And then a new Weekender episode of the podcast on Friday. Go over to patreon.com/muckrake-podcast. The Substack is at jaredyatessexton.substack.com. I think all of you, you're wonderful. You're great. I'm so glad that we are in this together and that you fight the good fight. You care about this. You stay educated. You stay informed. We have to. We absolutely have to keep track of what's going on, because I have to tell you, the people who are doing this, the people who are carrying it out, they want nothing more than for you to not pay attention to this stuff. They want you to just look at the pageantry on cable news. They want you to just watch this as entertainment and not get involved. And we can't do that. There's no option to do that. Not optional. We got to get involved. So this is to you. This is to us. Here's to beating this thing back. Better days ahead. Cheers. Ooh, that was cold. It was cold outside. All right. You're the absolute best. See you soon.